Welcome to another episode of the Tech Intersect Podcast, where we dive deep into the intersections of technology, law, and innovation. Today, I'm really excited to have Marisa T. Coppel, Head of Legal at the Blockchain Association, to join us today. Marisa played herself didn't do justice to her background, so I'm going to let you know about all that she is doing. She plays a critical and essential, a really crucial role in developing policy positions and advocating on behalf of the crypto industry. She has a background in big law, fantastic academic credentials as well. She brings a wealth of experience to the table. So today we'll talk about recent actions and positions taken by the Blockchain Association, explore their implications for the future of blockchain advocacy. We will talk about all of that and more in a moment. But first, Marisa, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
Absolutely. There's so many practitioners who listen to the show. We have law students, practitioners, but also folks from finance, a lot of different areas. So often people are in a position at a corporation or at a law firm, and you know what this is like, and you pivoted your focus. And so talk just about that road from formal practice into the advocacy that you're doing now at Blockchain Association.
Yeah, sure. So I started my practice at a law firm called O'Melveny and Myers, and then I clerked and then went to Covington and Burling. And in both of those firms, I was doing mostly litigation and like white collar regulatory enforcement defense work. And I really liked the work I was doing. I found it really interesting. The people I worked with were amazing, super smart, just really fantastic. Found that I, did not enjoy the law firm billing hour culture. And I knew that I didn't want to become a partner at a firm. So when I was a fifth year, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And when I was a first year, I had been staffed on an SEC investigation of a crypto company. And that was my first real intro into the industry. And I just found it fascinating, like from a intellectual legal standpoint, since there was no real clear law. And I guess we're 6 years later and there still
Right.
is no clear law.
Yeah.
So when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I like crypto and going into crypto full time just immediately came to the front of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I was connected to the Blockchain Association through my former boss, Jake Chervinsky, who was our
Mm-hmm.
chief policy officer. And he left last fall to go be a chief legal officer at Variant, which is a VC fund in the space.
Mm-hmm.
He actually clerked for the same judge I clerked for. And he interviewed me when I was in law school. So it just
Wow.
demonstrates the importance of the network.
Right. Amazing.
Yeah. And I joined BA in the beginning of May of 2022. So,
Mm-hmm.
over a year and a half now, almost 2 years, which is kind of crazy.
Right. And I'm sure it feels like 22 years. That's how quickly things move, for
It's true.
sure. It makes me think I earlier today was doing a keynote, and I was trying to identify, I say this date almost every day, that I started in 2017 and kind of talking about my rabbit hole experience. But then when I said it out loud, I was like, was it 2017? It's like that is short and long all at one time. And in fact, when you think about your own kind of rabbit hole experience, particularly as a woman in the space. Talk about that transition for you, or when you first, my book is about digital money demystified. I believed every single myth there ever was, and I had to challenge myself in the beginning. Did you find yourself doing that? What was your experience?
Yeah. You mean challenge myself in the sense of like my assumptions about money?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I joined the industry full time. Like, I fully believe that blockchain technology can transform our financial system and
Right.
make it more equitable. And like historically marginalized populations, women, people of color have been excluded from our banking system.
Hmm.
And crypto, you don't need a bank account to build wealth and hold your assets.
Right.
I think that's a little separate from like the Web3 motivation and promise, which is
Hmm.
the second reason why I joined. But it is similar in the sense of it gives individuals more control. And like with Web3, the theory behind it is that it takes away power from the large tech corporations and puts the power and control back in the hands of users.
Hmm. It's so important to, for me, it was really a seismic shift in just how I orient myself with respect to currency, with respect to value, with assets, as an investor, but also as a professional, and the impact and the responsibility really of being an educator of these bright legal minds. I have, I think, 13 or 14 students in my current blockchain, cryptocurrency, and law course, and
That's awesome.
they're just blowing my mind. Like, I'm so excited for the future. I'm kind of pulling my legacy colleagues. It's a full-time job. I'm not going to quit, but I'm banking on the future, to be
Yeah,
sure.
definitely. I
But
wish that I could have taken that class when I was in law
same,
school. It just
me
didn't
too.
exist.
And I want to see, I want to see more. I'm going to challenge my colleagues. You cannot send law students into the world without touching in a substantive way this information. In many
Totally.
ways, we are building the plane while we're flying it, but we also, a part of going to law school and learning doctrine and stare decisis and all that means, the intricacies of the legislative branch and the executive branch and the judicial branch. Literally, what I teach in blockchain, crypto, and the law is like 99% administrative law. And
Totally.
isn't it, at the end of the day? And to see it playing out in real time is really fascinating. We cannot send law students into the world unprepared for the people who are building and moving to this next iteration of the internet and business and law. I'm probably preaching to the converted with you, but I imagine you agree.
Yes, I 100% agree. And, I never took admin law when I was in law
Mm,
school, and I wish I had.
yeah,
I wish I could pull up an old outline, but that you're right that that is a key like legal area that we're dealing with.
yeah.
And it usually comes up in the context of comment letters to proposed rulemakings, which
Hmm.
conceivably could turn into litigation,
Right.
based on an APA argument. So we
Hmm.
constantly raise APA arguments in our comment letters, and even just when talking to regulators who might have a tendency to overreach.
Absolutely. Well, let's continue along that line. Recently, Blockchain Association submitted comments, and you do often, on FinCEN's proposed rule on convertible virtual currency mixing, correct?
Yes.
Elaborate on the main concerns and the recommendations that you outlined in the comments.
Yeah, so this is a perfect example of where I think that the intent of the agency was to only target true mixers, but the proposal, the language that was used in how they defined CVC mixing was
Hmm.
so broad that it would capture a ton of other activity.
Mm,
So I don't think that was their intent. And this is
yeah,
like the value of comment letters, right? And like why we have a comment letter process
yeah.
is to help educate the agency before they finalize regulation. But the main concern was that the definition of CVC mixing was far too broad. It potentially could pull in things or activity just like pooling assets,
Mm,
generally. Multi-sigs is like another one, but it was the first time FinCEN used Section 311 authority, which is pretty like a drastic move on
right.
their end. And another concern is that already they've issued statements where they have, expressed their concern over mixing activity. And this has caused covered financial institutions, who are the ones regulated by FinCEN,
Hmm.
to already do reporting on this type of activity. So theoretically, this reg wouldn't do anything new. So it just
Mm,
has this overreaching effect that could stifle innovation, and target a lot of like valid and licit activity, which is not FinCEN's, goal. So our
right.
comment letter addressed these concerns and explained how it would, impact the tech. And I'm hopeful that they will narrow the definition to something more workable.
Hmm.
But this is, the point of the comment letter process, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so critically important, and we see those that notice and comment period is critically important to participate. I know that you also are involved in filing amicus briefs as well. Had the great fortune of participating on one for the Custodia Bank v. Federal Reserve. So let's talk about that. Can you explain the significance of the case for the crypto industry? I think it's one of, I mean, we have some really pivotal and what will eventually be seminal cases right now. We'll look back on this time and realize how important. Talk about Custodia Bank and versus Federal Reserve in particular, and why the association decided to get involved.
Yeah, so broadly speaking, the case concerns Custodia Bank, which is a bank that was founded in Wyoming, and they applied for a master account with the Fed. Typically, that process to get approval is pretty seamless. You fill out a fairly simple application, and there could be, some process in between, but it's a fairly like streamlined process.
Mm,
But because Custodia is dealing with crypto assets, the national arm of the Fed got involved in this process and ended up, the allegation is that they directed the state arm of the Fed to deny Custodia's master account.
mm,
And so the core issue in the case, and what we wrote our amicus brief on, is maintaining the power of a dual banking system in this country. So the state banking system versus the federal banking system. And it's really important for the crypto industry because, especially the past 2 years, we've seen the federal banking regulators indicate that they view crypto as a very risky asset,
mm,
risky activity too. And it has caused a lot of the federal banks to avoid banking, crypto related companies. So it's been very hard for crypto companies to have access to banking services, which is kind
right.
of ironic. But so they've relied on state banks. And if the power of state banks is lessened, that could make it even harder to access, safe banking solutions. So
Hmm.
that was why we thought the case was impactful to our industry in particular. And our brief really focused on how important it is to maintain this dual banking system. Often, state banks, like historically speaking, have been the innovators in the
Mm.
banking space. So it is very important to keep up that regime where the state banks are allowed to provide banking services and create new banking products. But this case threatens that system.
Yeah, this also forced me to really roll up my sleeves and dig into just how the banking system works, how it's set up, the role of the Fed. We use these terms without fully appreciating the impact and the system. And I think when people really start to understand and appreciate the existing system, then that lends to greater credence and understanding ultimately of the disruptive impact of new opportunities. And disruptive, it's almost a pejorative in some sense. I don't think so, but when you mention it, the disruption, I'd rather say, I guess, the innovative opportunities, and also to ensure that you have access at the state level. And so it can be very nuanced and complicated, obviously. And what you've just said reminds me of some of my testimony before the House Financial Services Subcommittee on Digital Assets last year when we were talking about Choke Point 2.0. Not on the books, but kind of in effect, cutting off
Right.
access to industries that the government frowns upon. right?
Right.
Choke point 1.0, an actual official policy that was overturned, of course, under the Obama administration, but that was focused on something I guess people can look at, predatory lending, payday loans, and how that is problematic. But it's always a great idea until the focal point becomes something that, when you're thinking now, the crypto and the blockchain industry that I know to provide access and inclusion and opportunity, that the administration doesn't agree, which
Right.
really pains me as well, because I feel, now I'm thinking of democracy, little d, this idea of democratic opportunity. I see so much of it. I'm wondering why, and speak at any level that you want to. Immediately, what comes to mind, or the person, maybe like Senator Warren and et cetera, and some of the cautionary focus, right? And
Right.
I think that's a gentle way of saying it, but it just seems so misaligned with democratic
Totally.
principles that
Yep.
I'm at a loss. I know you are. Talk to me, help me off
Yeah,
this
I
ledge.
mean, you're hitting on this like internal struggle that I have every day.
Right.
It pains me too. I am progressive. I'm a
Same.
Democrat, and I really believe that crypto like aligns with my progressive values.
Right.
And I used to be a Warren fan, right? And
Right.
you would
Same.
think she's anti big bank. You would think that she would, be pro crypto, which is taking
Hmm.
the power away from the banks. But at the same time, she wants the government to have a lot of power.
Mm.
So the idea of crypto and like a free like a blockchain where users, it's totally permissionless, users can control their own assets, and it's protected away from potential government intervention, like
Hmm.
threatens that. um and I think it boils down to like the national security angle that she
Yes.
has. And when Bitcoin in particular was gaining in popularity, the like negative stories were that it was used by terrorists and drug dealers. And
Right.
I think that narrative still exists, and it's very hard to combat it because obviously we don't want North Korea to use, crypto to fund their weapons program,
Right.
or Hamas, or, whoever that is, yeah, threatening our national security.
Hmm.
But I think that we are working very hard to get back to those democratic values and
Hmm.
really like highlight those to lawmakers, because the
Hmm.
result of some of these policies is that it stifles innovation in the space.
Right.
And that's like constantly a balance that we're facing. So, but it's our biggest challenge, particularly this year, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, this year is particularly complex because the technology marches on. It does not take a
Right.
holiday for our electoral cycle, right? And the rest of the world moves on as well. This is not in a vacuum. And I'm often challenged to speak specifically about the United States. Obviously, I'm a lawyer in the United States, I teach here, but we are dealing with global innovation in an increasingly globalized society where the underlying technology, forget about crypto assets for a moment, but even the distributed technologies that impact all Web3 technology. We're talking artificial intelligence, machine learning, the Internet of Things. People don't talk about it, but it still
Right.
literally is a thing. Um, we can't do this in isolation, and we
Right.
can't, the
Totally.
brooding and the pushback while the rest of the world moves on,
Hmm.
it harms the access and opportunity for consumers and investors in the United States, harms the ability to be a leader in this innovation. It makes me think of the impact and what we gave to the world when the internet, Web 2.0 was born, or even the
Right.
first iteration, to
Right.
then take our hands off of the wheel and allow someone else or others to guide the conversation makes zero sense to me.
Totally.
So I'm wondering, it's a good point about in this election cycle, knowing that we have some bipartisan support for legislation, but so few legislative days on the calendar this year when you really distill it, um, where we have more action on in the judicial branch, because I always say until Congress acts, we have what we have in terms of regulators, and so we're battling between regulators and the judiciary.
Right.
What impact do you think the strategy of like strategic litigation, the legal projects that you're managing at Blockchain Association, how does that help to shape and define? While I feel like we're in a holding pattern in the United States, it has to be frustrating, but we still have to move on with the advocacy.
Yeah, totally. And I think it just highlights the importance of the courts and our judicial system
Yes.
in like the overall system of creating and making policy.
Mm.
We obviously have a divided Congress right now, so it's very hard to pass legislation, and who knows what will happen
True.
next year. Um, but we also have examples of overzealous regulators like the SEC, and
Hmm.
the checks and balances system put the onus on the courts to maintain, the balance with the regulators.
Mm.
So I think there's a lot of lack of clarity in the industry, and because the SEC, for instance, has not done helpful rulemaking and there has not been comprehensive legislation passed, although we've made a lot of progress in
Right.
Congress, nothing has like become law yet. I think the industry is looking to the courts. And there's a lot happening in the courts, and there will be a lot more. I think there will be more strategic litigation, like affirmative
Hmm.
litigation brought by industry participants to help
Yeah.
clarify things. But even in the instances of enforcement actions, like if you look at the SEC's case against Coinbase, the
Hmm.
potential for that case, and the same with the one against Binance and Kraken, like that
Right.
could for the industry.
Absolutely. And thereby bring greater protections, the very protections for consumers and investors and entrepreneurs in the space and businesses in the space. Because with the piecemeal approach of regulation by enforcement, everyone else is left to read the tea leaves. Does my
Right.
project align with this particular regulated party or not? You kind of throw up your hands and say, I'm not going to take a risk to learn after the fact when I've worked in good faith, while others are skirting responsibility. And we have the crypto contagion year with the likes of Sam Bankman Fried that takes over the conversation when, we both know that wasn't technically a crypto fraud, it was
Right,
fraudulent
exactly.
activity, right?
Yes.
But we
Like
get the black
crime.
eye. Right.
Yes.
It's literally a crime. They're
Yeah.
crimes, and it's on the books. And in
Right.
fact, and I like to say, from the moment that he was apprehended until he was convicted was a year. It took a lot longer with Bernie Madoff. We're talking about Lehman Brothers, all this other garden variety fraud. I'd hate to call it that, but that is
Right.
what it is. But meanwhile, the industry suffers not only from those acts of a few, like the entire industry takes on that face, unfortunately,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
But also that slips through while good faith actors are spending a gazillion dollars to battle.
Right. Right. Exactly.
So talk to me in the time we have left. We've talked about so many different approaches to moving the industry forward as a matter of advocacy, et cetera. That means it's complex. We have a complex legislative environment, we have a complex regulatory environment. How do you prioritize um, your approach to advocacy and your approach to like what are your top priorities, I guess, for the next year to 10 years?
So, I mean, this industry, as you know, it's like 1 year is 10 years,
I
right?
know.
I think this year there will be a big focus on issues relating to illicit finance.
Mm,
And then also SEC related issues. I would say like those are the two big buckets.
hmm.
So yeah, those are the big focuses.
Hmm.
Generally speaking, we tend to focus on the most existential issues first,
Hmm.
um, and we'll prioritize, resources in that way. Like for instance, the IRS proposed a rule related to how they define a broker,
Mm.
and that proposed rule is pretty existential to the industry. Sorry, my phone was ringing. So
No
we
worries.
we put a lot of resources into that. Yeah, so hopefully that's
Yeah.
helpful.
No, that is. So, lastly, for listeners who are interested in the work that you continue to do, advocacy, what your advocacy priorities are. I know that you have an extensive website. So, talk to them about the best way to connect or even contribute. There's so many people who are getting off the sidelines and into the game. I love. So, what should they do or where should they go to learn more?
Yeah, so I mean, you can follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn, and the Blockchain Association as well. Our website has some policy focus areas, so there's a lot of resources in there. And in terms of contributing financially, I would highly recommend contributing to organizations like Coin Center and the DeFi Education Fund.
Hmm.
They are, amazing advocates for the industry and, do similar things that we do, but have slightly different focus. And we're a trade association, so it would be hard for an individual to contribute financially to us. But
Right.
yeah, I definitely would focus on those organizations. Another good one is Fight for the Future.
Oh, yeah.
They do a lot of awesome work too.
I'm going to make sure that I have all those links in the show notes for when this is added to the Buzzsprout feed in a couple of weeks. But those who joined us live, you got, to look behind the scenes for this. Marisa Coppel, I appreciate you and the work. You have my bat line, anything you need. It's already done. I appreciate your advocacy. You kind of keep your head down and do the work, but I hope to amplify what you're doing because I like to put a face behind the activity. There's so many amazing women doing outstanding things in the space. So thank you for the work that you do and for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thanks for your work as well. Would
I,
love to amplify it in the same way. I think we've got to support each other, right?
absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.